Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Otis Langston. I'm 38 years old, and today I serve as the governor of Oregon. But don't let the title fool you. I didn't grow up in power. I grew up in the shadow of it, a shadow cast by a father who believed that compassion was weakness, and that only one thing ever mattered: money. My earliest memories are of a house that looked perfect on the outside. White pillars, a circular driveway, roses so red they looked fake. People used to say, "Wow, the Langstons really have it all." But they didn't see what happened inside. My father, Gerald Langston, was the CEO of Langston Minerals, a multi-billion-dollar mining empire that ran across the Pacific Northwest. He had steel-gray hair, a jaw like a granite cliff, and a voice that cut through rooms like a whip. "You want to matter in this world, Otis," he used to say. "Then stop crying about trees and start learning how to take." He didn't believe in second chances, only bottom lines. And he believed in my brother, Miles. Miles was 4 years younger than me, but you'd think he was the firstborn. He was charismatic, confident, a miniature version of my father with perfect teeth and a natural charm that masked his cruelty. By the time we were teenagers, it was already clear: Miles was the golden boy, and I was the disappointment. I'll never forget the moment my father first called me a failure. I was 15. He brought us to one of his copper mining sites in southern Oregon. The air smelled like burnt rubber. The stream nearby was dead, no fish, just sludge. "Dad," I said quietly, "we're poisoning the land." He looked at me like I'd just confessed to setting the house on fire. "Poisoning," he said. "That's profit, Otis. You see death, I see dividends." I looked at Miles. He was smirking. "Don't worry, Dad," Miles said. "I'll make sure the company doesn't fall apart once I take over." My father nodded, satisfied. "You hear that, Otis? That's how a Langston talks." That moment was the first break. The first crack in the foundation of everything I thought I belonged to. The second came 2 years later. My father wanted me to attend Wharton and study business. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. But I had other plans. I'd been accepted to Oregon State's environmental science program, and I knew what I had to do. When I told him, he didn't yell. He laughed. "You think you're better than this family?" "Better than me?" he said, eyes hard as steel. "Fine. Go save the whales. But don't expect a dime from me. You're on your own." And just like that, I was cut off. No money. No car. No contact. My mother, God bless her, tried to help in quiet ways. But she was a porcelain vase in a house of sledgehammers. Fragile. Beautiful. Easily broken. So I left. Alone. I packed a duffel bag and rode a Greyhound bus across the state. I stepped into a cold dorm room with nothing but 2 shirts and a notebook full of dreams about cleaner rivers, protected forests, and a future I might never see, but had to fight for anyway. And in that moment, I made a vow. I'd never crawl back. I'd prove them all wrong. Even if it killed me. I thought the hardest part would be leaving home. It wasn't. The hardest part was surviving afterward. Oregon State's environmental science program was everything I dreamed of, at least on paper. The professors were passionate, the curriculum rigorous, and the campus sat near dense forests and winding rivers I'd only seen in books. But I couldn't focus on any of that, not when every day was a fight just to stay afloat. I worked nights scrubbing the kitchens of a diner off campus. Then mornings stacking boxes at a warehouse near Corvallis. On the weekends, I cleaned toilets in the dormitories just to scrape together rent for a tiny studio with no heat and roaches that refused to die. I ate peanut butter and expired ramen most nights, my textbooks held together by duct tape. Some days I couldn't even afford coffee, and I'd fall asleep in the library trying to keep up with lectures on toxic runoff and soil regeneration. Every inch of progress felt like walking through molasses in the dead of winter. Meanwhile, my brother Miles sent photos from Dubai. One of him holding champagne on a yacht. Another standing next to my father in some fancy boardroom with gold-accented walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. His captions were always smug. The future of Langston Minerals looks bright. Wish you were here, oh wait. I never replied. Sometimes I stared at those pictures until my chest physically ached. Not because I wanted their life, but because I couldn't understand how we came from the same blood, yet walked such different paths. I remember one night in particular. I'd just gotten home from a 10-hour shift at the warehouse. My legs were numb, my hands raw from lifting steel drums. I flopped onto the mattress on the floor, my bed, and found an envelope under the door. It was from the university. I opened it slowly, heart pounding. I'd lost one of my grants. A donor pulled out because my grades dropped. Because I couldn't stay awake long enough to write the last paper on riverbed toxicity. I sat there staring at that piece of paper, my fingers trembling. It felt like the world was laughing at me. The next day, I called my mom. I hadn't spoken to her in months. She picked up on the second ring. Otis. Her voice was soft. Surprised. Nervous. I just wanted to say hi, I lied. That's all. There was silence on the other end. Then she whispered, "Your father said you're working at a diner. Is it true?" I hesitated. "I'm doing what I need to do." Another pause. "He's disappointed, Otis. He told the country club board you wouldn't last a year out there. He says you're wasting your potential." I closed my eyes. I already knew. "Maybe," I said softly. "But at least I can sleep at night." My mom didn't respond. And after a few seconds, I told her I had to go. I cried that night. Not out of weakness, but because I had no one. Not a friend who truly understood, not a family to catch me if I fell. Just me and my anger and this bitter, unrelenting dream of a better world. But even in the darkness, something in me refused to break. Some part of me still believed I wasn't wrong. That the world didn't need more men like my father or my brother. It needed people who gave a damn. People who weren't afraid to lose everything for something real. That belief, that small flame, kept me alive. That, and one unexpected friend. Her name was Professor Shireen Patel. A water systems expert who had published studies on ecological restoration and mining contamination. She noticed me once, half asleep in class with bags under my eyes and stained sleeves. After class, she stopped me. "You look like you're surviving. Not living. What's your story, Mr. Langston?" I froze. Most people just saw the last name. No one asked what it cost to walk away from it. So I told her the truth. And she didn't laugh. She didn't pity me. She nodded, like she'd met my kind before, fighters who had nothing but grit in their pockets. From that day forward, she became my mentor. She gave me a part-time job in her lab testing river samples. Paid just enough to let me quit the diner. And every week, she reminded me of what mattered. "Otis," she once said, "a clean conscience may not fill your wallet, but it will help you sleep. And eventually, it just might change the world." I clung to those words. I worked harder than ever. Studied longer. Wrote papers that brought tears to my eyes. And by the end of my senior year, I had offers from 3 environmental nonprofits, even one government internship. But I didn't accept any of them yet. Because something in the back of my mind kept whispering. This story isn't over. Graduation came quietly. No family in the crowd. No father in the front row with pride in his eyes. Just Professor Patel clapping from the side, her smile soft and knowing. I wore my cap and gown like armor that day, not because I felt triumphant, but because I felt free. After the ceremony, she handed me a manila folder. "Open it when you're alone," she said. "And remember, you were never the failure." I waited until nightfall. Sitting in the cheap studio apartment I still called home, I opened the folder and felt my stomach twist. Inside was a printed email chain. Dozens of documents. And a headline from 3 years prior I'd somehow missed in the chaos of survival. Whistleblower alleges Langston Minerals deliberately falsified water reports in 3 Oregon counties. I blinked. Stared harder. One of the emails caught my eye. It was a scanned message from a company scientist named Reuben Mars, someone I vaguely remembered from a dinner party when I was young. He had written, "We can't keep burying the numbers, Gerald. These rivers are poisoning people. If the EPA gets hold of this raw data, we're screwed." Another email, this time forwarded from Miles. "Dad, chill. I've already told the guys in legal to scrub the reports. Reuben's just paranoid." My hands trembled as I flipped page after page. There were manipulated lab results. Internal memos about silencing community activists. Even payout logs, hush money sent to small-town officials, all hidden through consulting fees. Langston Minerals wasn't just dirty, they were rotten to the core. But the final page is what broke me. A memo dated during my senior year in college, stamped with urgent. "Due to persistent concerns about groundwater contamination, I recommend shutting down the southern operation until further review. The Langston boys can't see the long-term cost of this kind of negligence. Shireen Patel, Ph.D." My mentor had already tried to warn them. And I never knew. I sat there, the weight of it all pressing on my chest. All the years they'd mocked me for choosing trees over profit. All the times my brother laughed while people in these counties were getting sick. I remembered that stream I saw as a boy, the one my father dismissed as collateral damage. The people who lived near it had no idea they were drinking poison. Suddenly my anger wasn't just personal, it was righteous. And that was the night everything changed. I didn't sleep. I spent hours combing through public environmental records, then private investigative blogs. Shireen had buried clues everywhere, but no one had put the puzzle together. But I could. Because I knew the Langston way of doing business. I knew how they disguised bribes as strategic grants. I knew how they used shell companies to create false compliance reports. And most of all, I knew my father had an entire wing of lawyers paid to make things disappear. Until now. 1 month later, I applied for a job at a small, fiercely independent environmental nonprofit called Future Earth. They didn't take corporate donations, didn't answer to political parties. They took cases no one else would. When they asked me why I wanted in, I told them the truth. I'm here to fight giants. They hired me on the spot. Over the next 2 years, I worked as quietly and relentlessly as my father had once taught me, only now, for a different kind of empire. I started with public data collection. Community interviews. Digging through health records from counties near Langston facilities. I talked to single mothers who lost children to rare cancers. Farmers whose crops kept failing. Ranchers who couldn't sell their cattle because the meat was contaminated. In every case, there was a river nearby. And in every river, the name Langston appeared. The final puzzle piece came one night while I was organizing community files. A woman named Hannah Reyes approached me at a local town hall. Early 40s. Sharp voice. Worn hands. She shoved a paper into my chest. "You want proof? Here." It was her son's medical report, diagnosed with acute lead poisoning. They lived less than a mile from one of my father's lithium mines. She whispered, "They told us it was safe. But the water smells like rust, and my boy can't even hold a pencil anymore." I walked back to my rental that night feeling like the earth itself was screaming through these people. And I made a decision. I wasn't just going to fight the Langstons. I was going to end them. Not with fists. Not with rage. But with evidence. With public shame. With truth. And maybe, just maybe, with the law on my side. There's something oddly calming about knowing your life's mission has a name. Mine was simple: bring Langston Minerals to its knees. But this wasn't about screaming into a void or writing angry blog posts. No, if I was going to take down an empire, my father's empire, it had to be strategic. Surgical. Legal. And public. So I started mapping it like a war plan. Step 1, expose the pattern. For 2 years, I gathered documentation. Water samples. Public complaints. Legal loopholes. I created timelines that traced contamination outbreaks with the opening dates of Langston sites. I logged dozens of cases where people got sick, respiratory issues, nerve damage, lead exposure. Most were poor, rural, and lacked the means to fight back. I also identified key players, regulators who had not been paid off. Local activists who'd been ignored. Doctors who noticed trends in patient illnesses. These people were my allies now. They just didn't know it yet. One night, I visited Shireen's office. I'm going after them, I told her plainly, eyes burning. She didn't blink. Good, she said. Let's make sure you have the firepower. She introduced me to an environmental lawyer named Lena Cho, a woman who once sued a power company into bankruptcy after a coal ash spill poisoned 2 towns. Lena wasn't just sharp, she was lethal. The kind of person who read contracts the way surgeons read anatomy. Langston Minerals, she said when I handed her the folder. I've been waiting for someone to open this box. And so we formed our secret coalition: scientists, lawyers, journalists, and whistleblowers. We met in diners, rented rooms, even parked cars. No emails. No paper trails. Just a growing truth too large to bury. But even with a mountain of evidence, I knew none of it would stick unless the right eyes saw it. That's when I turned to Daphne Roan. She was an investigative journalist for the Oregon Sentinel, fearless and hungry for the kind of story that shakes a state to its knees. We met in a quiet cafe outside Eugene. I slid a flash drive across the table. This is what your editors won't believe until they see it, I said. She raised an eyebrow. You're the son, aren't you? Gerald Langston's boy. I nodded once. She leaned in, almost whispering. So what made you turn on your own family? I didn't flinch. Because they turned on everyone else first. She smiled. Then let's burn it down. By spring, Daphne had everything. Months' worth of data, testimonies, and leaked emails. We worked together for weeks, ensuring every line was bulletproof. We even had chemical analysis results from 3 independent labs confirming that the contamination came from Langston's mines. The article was set to go live in June. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want them to read about it. I wanted them to feel it, in a room full of people who used to worship the Langston name. So I made a plan. My mother's 60th birthday was approaching. My father was throwing a massive gala at the estate. All the elites would be there, politicians, judges, CEOs, including the man who once told me I'd never amount to anything without the Langston brand. I RSVP'd with 2 words. I'll attend. But before the party, I made sure the article's release was timed to the minute. 8:05 p.m., the height of the gala, the Oregon Sentinel would publish a story titled Poison and Power, Inside Langston Minerals Environmental Crimes. It would go live with leaked evidence, first-person accounts, water test results, and even a video confession from Ruben Mars, the former Langston chemist who had quietly reached out and told us everything. And just to seal the moment, I arranged for Judge Everett Nolan, a man who'd been silently supporting environmental justice for years, to be present that night. He'd play a role. A very specific role. The last piece. I practiced my lines. Because when my father stood to give a toast to family legacy, he wouldn't know that the very thing he built was crumbling beneath him. I wasn't coming to that party to make peace. I was coming to light the fuse. The night of the gala arrived like a thunderstorm with no rain, just tension in the air, thick and ready to split. I stood outside the Langston estate, staring up at the same marble pillars I once walked past as a child. Back then, I thought this place was a palace. Now, it looked like a tomb built on lies. My hand tightened on the velvet-wrapped box I carried, not a gift, but a symbol. Something my mother would recognize. Something my father wouldn't see coming. A valet opened the door for me, blinking when he saw the name on the card. "Mr. Otis Langston?" he asked, almost startled. I nodded. He led me through the crowd. Inside, everything gleamed, crystal chandeliers, silk dresses, black suits tailored to perfection. The laughter of the elite danced through the air like champagne bubbles. The scent of power and arrogance was almost too much to breathe in. But I smiled. Because they had no idea the fire was already lit. I found my mother first. She wore a soft gray gown and a weary smile, eyes scanning the room like she was hoping for peace but bracing for war. "Otis," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "I didn't know if you'd come." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, and I meant it. I handed her the small box. Inside was a necklace, a tiny blue sapphire shaped like a river drop. She opened it and gasped. "Crater Lake," she said softly. "Your favorite place when you were a boy." "And yours," I reminded her. "The cleanest water in Oregon." Her hands trembled as she clipped it around her neck. She looked at me, eyes filled with something that felt like sorrow and pride twisted together. She didn't say it, but I saw it. She knew tonight would not end with cake. Then the voice I'd waited for cut through the air like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention?" My father stood at the head of the banquet hall. Dressed in a navy blue suit with gold cufflinks and his signature smirk, Gerald Langston looked every bit the king of his crumbling kingdom. He raised his glass. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my beloved wife's 60th birthday. Eleanor is the soul of this family, the steady hand behind our legacy." I zoned out after that. I'd heard versions of this speech since I was 6. Legacy. Empire. Honor. Wealth. What he never said was the truth. How many bodies were buried in the soil his company poisoned, how many rivers were sacrificed for quarterly profit margins. But then came the moment I planned for. He raised his glass higher. "And of course, I'm proud to stand beside my son Miles, who will carry this company forward and ensure that the Langston name continues to stand for excellence." I saw the smirk flicker across Miles' lips from across the room. A few polite claps. Some raised glasses. And then I stepped forward. "Actually," I said, loud enough for the microphones to catch it, "I think the Langston name's about to stand for something very different." The room froze. Dozens of heads turned. My father's glass stopped midair. "What are you doing?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. I smiled. At 8:05 p.m., my phone buzzed. Daphne's message, "It's live." I turned to the crowd. "If anyone here would like to read tonight's feature on the Oregon Sentinel," I said, "I suggest you look up the article titled Poison and Power, Inside Langston Minerals' Environmental Crimes." A ripple of confusion passed through the room. Phones came out. Whispers turned into murmurs. Then gasps. A woman shrieked. Someone dropped a glass. The projector screen meant for the birthday slideshow suddenly lit up. Daphne had hacked it in sync. A large image filled the screen, the poisoned river in Klamath County. Then test results. Then a headline. Exclusive, Langston whistleblower details cover-up, bribes, and water contamination. My father's face went pale. Miles stood, shouting, "This is fake. He's trying to ruin us." And that's when Judge Everett Nolan rose from his seat. He held up a document. "I've seen this evidence," he said calmly. "And I've personally referred it to the State Attorney General's Office for Criminal Investigation." Gasps echoed like gunshots. People were now backing away from Miles, from my father, distancing themselves like rats from a sinking ship. "Otis," my father growled through clenched teeth. "Outside. Now." But I didn't move. Instead, I leaned into the microphone. "For years," I said, "you told me I was a failure. That protecting the environment was weakness. But tonight, this is strength. This is what legacy should look like: truth, accountability, and justice." My mother stood silently, hands covering her mouth, tears in her eyes. My father walked out, face ashen. Miles tried to follow, but cameras were now trained on him. As the media vans pulled up outside the gate, tipped off by Daphne, the Langston name began to crumble in real time. And I stood in the wreckage, steady, calm, and finally, seen. By midnight, the Langston estate was no longer a celebration, it was a crime scene in pearls and polished shoes. Reporters crowded the gates. Drones hovered overhead. Guests scrambled to delete photos with my father. Some even left through the side garden like thieves in gowns. My father and brother disappeared upstairs. My mother stood frozen beneath the chandelier, clutching the sapphire necklace I'd given her, as if it were the only steady thing in the room. But just as I began to feel the first flickers of peace, something shifted. A sharp voice cut through the quiet like a dagger through silk. "Governor Langston." I turned. A man stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway. Broad-shouldered, white hair slicked back, glasses glinting in the light. He wore a judge's robe, different from Nolan's. Familiar, but older. Then I recognized him. Judge Everett Vale. A longtime ally of my father. More than that, his friend. They used to play poker together in the basement. I once brought them drinks as a kid. Back then, Vale was someone I feared, quiet, commanding, dangerous behind a smile. Now he looked at me like a chess master who'd just found an opening. "Quite the stunt you pulled," he said, walking toward me slowly. "You had them all fooled. Even me." "I didn't fool anyone," I said. "I exposed the truth." He smirked. "And yet, you left something out." He reached into his coat and pulled out a manila envelope, one I didn't recognize. My blood ran cold. He handed it to me. "Thought you might want to read that before your little revolution goes any further." I opened it. Inside were financial documents. From Future Earth. My nonprofit. Specifically, a $25,000 donation made 2 years ago, from a subsidiary of Langston Minerals. A shell company. A shell company I hadn't noticed. At the bottom, my signature, approving the allocation of those funds. No. No, this isn't real. But it was. The routing numbers, the address, it was ironclad. I felt the air leave my lungs. Judge Vale leaned in close, his breath sour. "You were so busy trying to take down the empire," he said, "you didn't notice you were feeding off it too." He paused. "I've already forwarded this to the Attorney General. The same one you're counting on to prosecute your daddy." I clenched the envelope, jaw tight. "This doesn't change what your friends did," I said. "But it changes how people will see it," he replied. "The son who betrayed his family, while cashing their checks on the side. Hypocrisy plays better than heroism, Governor." He started to walk away. Then stopped. "Oh, and Otis? If you think your father was the only Langston capable of crushing people, you haven't met me on a bad day." My heart pounded. My mind raced. Was it true? Had someone buried that donation in our funding just to discredit me later? Had Miles or my father planted the seed, knowing I'd never trace it back until it was too late? Or worse. Had I overlooked it in desperation, so eager for support that I failed my own test? I felt the walls closing in. But just as quickly, a hand touched my shoulder. It was Lena Cho, my legal partner. She'd arrived late, intentionally, by design. A quiet observer in the chaos. She took one look at the envelope and smiled faintly. They finally played their card, she whispered. You knew. We suspected. We let it through. And we documented everything around it. She pulled out her phone. Tapped once. Up came a file, emails between Langston execs discussing the plan to plant the donation and tie it to my name. Call it insurance, Lena said. In case their world started to burn. My heart steadied. She looked at me with sharp, steady eyes. You've already won, Otis. This was their Hail Mary. But it's traceable, and we have the receipts. You're clean. I exhaled. Slowly. Deeply. Because for a moment, I'd thought it was over. But the truth? They had just fired their last bullet, and missed. I walked back into the ballroom. A few guests were still whispering, phones still glowing with the headline. And now, the second story was about to break. Because the Sentinel had part 2 queued up, the email leak between Langston executives and Judge Vale. I had given it to Daphne just in case. And at 12:07 a.m., it went live. Langston's secret network, corruption, judges, and the $25,000 setup. This time, the scandal wouldn't just take down a company. It would take down a system. And I had just pulled the final thread. I don't remember falling asleep that night, but I remember waking up the next morning to a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Every outlet wanted a quote. CNN. NPR. The Oregonian. Even 60 Minutes called. Because in less than 12 hours, the world had gone from celebrating the Langston name, to watching it implode. My father hadn't been arrested yet, but he'd gone underground. Miles had posted a shaky video on his social media calling the accusations politically motivated lies, before deleting his entire profile 2 hours later. And Judge Everett Vale? Suspended pending federal investigation. Thanks to Lena's airtight evidence and Daphne's back-to-back exposés, the entire shadow network collapsed like dominoes. But the victory didn't feel sweet. Not right away. Because revenge, when it lands, doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence. With reflection. With the weight of everything you gave up to get here. I walked alone that morning through Forest Park, the old trail near our childhood home. The same place I used to run when I needed to breathe. The trees were taller. The air was cool. For a moment, I didn't feel like a governor or a whistleblower. I just felt like a man who finally chose himself. Later that day, I received a message from my mother. Just 3 words. He knows now. I knew what she meant. My father had read every headline. Watched every clip. And for the first time in his life, he realized he couldn't control me. 2 weeks later. The state filed formal charges against Langston Minerals. Environmental fraud. Corruption. Criminal negligence. Destruction of protected wetlands. Dozens of executives resigned. My brother, Miles, took a private jet to Switzerland. My father? He requested a meeting. At first, I ignored it. But then I remembered the look on my mother's face the night of the gala, the sadness beneath her pride. And I knew I had to see this through. We met in a private room at a neutral location. No cameras. No press. Just me, him, and 2 decades of buried war. He looked older. Paler. Like a man who finally realized the empire he built had rotted from the inside out. He didn't say hello. He didn't offer a handshake. He just sat and stared for a long while. Then, finally. You destroyed everything. I held his gaze. No, I said. You did. I just stopped protecting it. His jaw clenched. You humiliated me. I nodded. The people you poisoned felt that too. Silence. He looked away. Then, almost inaudibly, I raised you to be strong. No, I said. You raised me to be obedient. I chose strength on my own. He didn't respond. I stood. This isn't about you and me anymore. It's about justice. For everyone you thought would stay silent. For everyone who drank what you dumped. I'm not your son in this moment, I'm the man who had to undo what your legacy destroyed. I left him sitting there. Defeated. Small. Exactly how he made me feel for 20 years. Today. It's been 1 year. Langston Minerals no longer exists. The land they desecrated is now under state control, and Future Earth, now properly funded, fully transparent, is leading the largest environmental restoration project in Oregon's history. Judge Everett Vale is awaiting trial. Miles has yet to return to the U.S. And my mother? She now teaches environmental literature at a local college, quietly, humbly, like the woman I always knew was hiding beneath the silks and silence. She wears the Crater Lake necklace every day. As for me, I'm still governor. But I'm also something else now. A symbol. Not of revenge. Not of rebellion. But of rebirth. Because I've learned that the most powerful thing you can do in this world is walk away from what tried to define you, and build something better in its place. This story started with failure. But it ends with truth. And if you're still listening, if you're holding pain that you think no one sees, let me say this clearly. You don't have to live inside the identity they gave you. You can choose your own. You can break the cycle. You can become the fire. And when you do, they won't know what hit them. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.